Hey everyone, welcome to part 8 of What If Paul and Ash Traveled to Unova. I know I left it on one hell of a cliffhanger last time, and I caught a lot of your guys' attention. So, now that you guys all see where I'm heading with this, let's take a look at how the battle between Giovanni and Ash will play out. We pick back up with Ash and Giovanni. Paul and Electivire look on in awe as Ash tells Giovanni that his reign of terror ends here. Giovanni laughs. "You think that your flaming monkey can stop me? I'd like to see you try." Ash says, "Okay," and he orders a flare blitz. INFERNAPES flames rage as it rushes in with speed never before seen from it. And this attack that is used, it was not a flare blitz. Ash, puzzled, asks what that was, as INFERNAPES forces VOLCORONA into a building, quickly changing Giovanni's demeanor. N then chimes in, "That was not a flare blitz, Ash, but the signature move of the legendary Pokemon Reshiram, Fusion Flare, a move with the ability to scorch the world." Ash looks on in amazement. Paul then yells to Ash to snap him out of it. "Ash, you have the power to stop Giovanni. Use it." Ash then snaps back and orders another attack from INFERNAPE, close combat, and this too is far stronger. Giovanni can't handle the fact that this boy is challenging him, so he orders VOLCORONA to attack, but it's useless, as it can't keep up with INFERNAPE and its new power. The battle rages, and Giovanni is becoming furious with Ash and INFERNAPE. But, as it looks like Ash and INFERNAPE are about to have the upper hand and end Giovanni's plans, INFERNAPE's flames subside and it begins to surge with electricity and writhes in pain. Ash can feel it too. This immobilizes the duel, putting things back in Giovanni's favor. He is pleased with this, and tells Ash how dare he challenge him, and he will pay for his indiscretions. Then, INFERNAPE begins to glow again, blinding everyone. When the light subsides, INFERNAPE lays unconscious, and beside him, the white stone. Giovanni orders another attack from VOLCORONA, and Paul orders Electivire to deflect it. Just as this happens, the attack from VOLCORONA is shot out of the sky by what looks like a giant ice ball. Then, above the city, what looks like a ship that is meant to sail over the sea appears with giant cannons. Over a loudspeaker, Giovanni is ordered to stand down, and from over the ship descend many different individuals, dressed for Black Ops work. Giovanni demands to know who would dare interfere with his affairs. Then, over the loudspeaker he hears, "I am Colress, the leader of Team Plasma, and you are trespassing in our region. Unova is under our protection. Leave now, or you will be dealt with." Giovanni just laughs. "So, another insect is after my throne. Well, just like this little boy, you will be dealt with as well." And he orders VOLCORONA to attack the ship. While this is going on, the members of Team Plasma are helping to clear the city of bystanders, and approaches Ash and Paul, and tells them they need to leave now, and grabs the white stone and puts it back in his bag. But there is a problem. Ash can't move, and INFERNAPE is in bad shape. All while above the battle between VOLCORONA and the ship rages on. As this is happening, above the city and the battle, dark, black clouds are starting to swirl in the sky. The ice balls being fired by the ship are being melted by VOLCORONA, as its heat is starting to flare up and envelop the ship. While this is happening, En and Paul are helping Ash up, and they recall INFERNAPE when they hear from the shadows, "Hello, son." En and Paul turn, and there stands a man dressed in a robe, and replies, "Why are you here?" The man responds, "Now, is that any way to greet your father?" Ash says, "Father?" En says, "You're no father of mine." Paul asks, "Who is this man?" En replies, "His name is Getsis, and he is the founder of Team Plasma." Ash says, "You mean the ones that are helping clear the city?" En replies, "Yes." Getsis then tells En the reason that he is here is because of Giovanni and his actions. He wishes to stop it and offer En one final chance to reconsider his choice to join Team Plasma in their plans of liberation. En replies, "As I've told you before, I want nothing to do with you or your organization. My answer will not change." Getsis says, "What a shame. I was hoping to reconcile with my son, but sadly, it seems that time has not come." Meanwhile, the battle above the city is coming to a climax, as Colress activates a device that emits waves to interfere with Giovanni's control of VOLCORONA. Giovanni starts to lose control, so he amps up the pressure on his device, and as a result, VOLCORONA begins to writhe in pain and frantically starts attacking at random. One blast comes firing towards our heroes. Paul orders Electivire to block it with a thunder punch. As the moves collide, the storm above rages, striking down with lightning throughout Castelia's city. One bolt strikes the Team Plasma ship, and it starts to lose power, forcing them to start a retreat, but not before Colress gives the order to blow it. Then, north of the city, a huge explosion can be heard. This causes VOLCORONA to fall from the air to the ground. A second bolt hits Electivire, which supercharges it, giving it the power to push VOLCORONA's attack back. But this then causes Electivire to again flare up in a blinding rage, with it striking everyone in sight with thunder attacks. While everyone's attention is diverted, Getsis takes this chance to make his escape. Giovanni unable to control Volcorona and at a loss for words, tells everyone that without Volcorona, his plans have failed. So he orders Jesse, James, and Meowth to retreat back to the ruins, leaving Volcorona behind. This leaves Paul, Ash, and N to deal with Electivire, who is raging about. Iris arrives and sees what's going on. Once she realizes Infernape is out of the picture, she calls on Excadrill to help, hoping that it will still at least want to battle, even though it's not listening to her at the current time. They are in luck, as once it sees Electivire, it wants to battle it. But this enthusiasm is short-lived, as one Brick Break from Electivire knocks out Excadrill. The situation is looking dire. They are all out of options. Paul then steps forward. "This is my fault," he says. Ash says, "What do you mean, Paul?" Paul says, "If I was a trainer worthy of Electivire, then I would be able to get through to it. So that's what I'm going to do." It is at this point that N can sense a shift in Paul. Ash says, "This is it." And asks what? Ash says, "The part of Paul that's been missing. His resolve. We have to leave this to him." Paul sends out all of his Pokemon, trying to calm down Electivire. But in the end, it's not enough, and one by one they fall, until the only one that stands is Pignite. Pignite and Paul's battle is intense, and the intenser the battle gets, the more the furious storm surges. But Paul and Pignite's resolve is one, and all of the intense emotion between the two causes the storm to strike Electivire again, raising its power to new heights. Pignite quickly gets overwhelmed and pushed back. When Paul thinks that they've reached their limit, Pignite struggles to its feet, demonstrating that it won't let this be its limit, and Paul realizes that he can't let it be his either. Paul then has a thought. Is this how Ash feels? The drive to shatter his limits? This provokes something deep within Pignite, and it starts to glow. Now Paul has a brand new Emboar, and it has a new move. Electivire begins to charge a final thunder attack as Paul calls for Emboar to use Heat Crash. The Fire Pig rushes in, throwing its full weight into the attack, colliding with Electivire with an explosion. When the dust settles, both Pokemon stand looking at each other. Then the storm surges one more time, then dissipates as both Pokemon fall unconscious. N just looks on, thinking to himself, why do you keep doing this? Paul recalls both of his Pokemon, and everyone rushes back to the Pokemon Center to check on Pikachu and to get the rest of the Pokemon looked at. Luckily, power has been restored, and after some brief cleanup, Nurse Joy is able to look at all of the Pokemon on their teams. She tells them that even though the damage is extensive, it's nothing too serious. In a week or so, all of the Pokemon should be back to 100%. This is a huge weight off of everyone's shoulders. But the mood is short-lived, as Paul confronts N. I knew there was a reason I didn't trust you. I knew that you were hiding something. Paul then sends out Escavalier and Torterra. You withheld vital information that got everyone hurt, and it could have been a lot worse. So you had better start talking, or you won't get another chance, as Paul orders Torterra and Escavalier to ready attacks. Ash and Iris try to stop Paul, but N says, hold on, Paul is right. I owe you all an explanation, so will you give me the chance to tell you everything? Paul says, you have one chance, so you better make it quick. N asks, do you remember the story I told you of the two heroes of Unova? Now we pick back up with Team Rocket as they are back to the desert ruins. Meowth asked Giovanni why he just left VOLCORONA behind. Giovanni said, that's simple. It can no longer battle, so just like any other tool, once it becomes useless, it will be discarded. Meowth gets quiet as they approach what used to be the sealed chamber. Now the interior lies in ruins. The explosion that they had heard was here, and the meteorite now lays in pieces. It still glows, but is not as bright as before. Giovanni blames Jesse, James, and Meowth for this turn of events. He deduces that Team Plasma must have been here, and he tells them if they would have screened their workers better, then they would have been able to catch the spy. Jesse, James, and Meowth panic in fear that they too will be discarded, but Giovanni then exclaims, luckily for you three, I still have use for you. They look at him in relief. Giovanni then says, it's time to prepare for Operation Tempest. Over on the plasma ship, they have settled out in the ocean for repairs. When Getsus approaches Colorus, it seems we failed, Colorus says. On the contrary, Getsus replies. It was anything but failure. Colorus says, how? Getsus says, in the eyes of the people, Team Rocket are the villains, and we are the heroes, which means we can proceed with our plans with no interruption. And I also got to see my son. Colorus says, and how did that go? Getsus replies, very well. I am now sure that he has one of the stones. Colorus then replies, well then, I have more good news. I was studying the storm during the whole event, and I think that I found the second one, but I can't be sure without more data. Getsus says that today was a good day. As he and Colorus look over a mysterious Pokemon, Getsus thinks to himself, you will soon be complete, and Unova will be mine. Back with our heroes, N explains the story that he told of the two heroes was much more than just a legend. It's a true story. Paul asks, please, there's no way it could be true. N then reaches into his bag and pulls out the white stone. I know it's true, because this is Reshiram, the Dragon of Truth, he exclaims. Ash Ash says, how does he know that? And then says, that man that we met gets us, dedicated his whole life to studying the old legends of Unova, and I was by his side the whole time. He claimed that he wanted to help the world, but over time, I came to realize the truth. He only seeks power. Iris then says that it seemed like his organization, Team Plasma, only wanted to help today, and says, don't trust it. That's what Getsus wants you to think, but don't believe it. Paul then urges N to finish his story, and then tells them that after many years of failure, his father finally done it. He found the location of one of the legendary dragons, this stone you see before you. By then I knew what his true plans were, so I took the stone and fled in hopes to reunite it with its rightful place. Paul then says, okay, but that doesn't explain what it has to do with us, and says, whenever the dragons awaken, it's because Unova is in great peril, and to respond to it, they seek a partner to bond with, someone that reflects its virtue. Ash, I believe Reshiram has chosen you as its emissary of truth. Ash then asks, what about Infernape? Why did it take on the form like that today? And replies, I don't know. Throughout my studies of Unova's ancient past, I have never read anything like that ever happening before. N says that now his father knows he has the stone, and he will be looking for him. N then turns to Ash and says, here, take it. N gives the stone to Ash. Ash says, are you sure? N says, yes. It's safer with you. No, it belongs with you. Reshiram has chosen you. For what? I don't know. But you now must complete the task and return it to the ruins of White. Paul says, and where is that? Iris then chimes in, it's in the northwestern part of Unova, close to the Dragon Spiral Tower. And says, so you know the old stories? Iris says, I know more than that. I come from the village of the dragons. Everything you told us is an old bedtime story for us. And then says, well, it seems that you guys should head there, as you may be able to fill in the blanks with my information. Ash and Paul tell Iris that that will be their next stop. Iris then puts the brakes on it, saying that the village is in the northernmost part of Unova, and there is no direct route there. It'll take some time. Ash says, that's fine, but they need to get there to get answers. Iris is secretly hesitant about this, but she doesn't want to let on that she is. While the story is being told, Officer Jenny brings in VOLCORONA to be looked at. It is in bad shape after the battle. Nurse Joy says she can't figure it out, but VOLCORONA doesn't seem to be responding to any type of treatment. Then, after N spends some time with it later on in the day, he learns that it needs to return to the desert resort, or it won't survive. Since Ash, Paul, and Iris have to wait for their Pokemon to recover, they cannot go on with it. So under the cover of night, Ash helps N sneak VOLCORONA out of the Pokemon Center so that N can get it home. N tells the group that they will meet again, but not to wait for him, as he has another mission to attend to. But before N leaves, he looks at Paul and says, I understand that you don't trust me, but know that my words are sincere. You're almost there. Whatever doubt and barriers you created for yourself, you've almost pushed through them all. And when you do, you will unlock a new level of power between you and your Pokemon that you have never known before. And with that, N takes his leave. After the week has passed, and Paul has spent some time thinking about what N said, the group decides to move on from Castelia City, heading to Nimbasa City. Ash realizes that N never talked with Krokorok, so he decides to try and figure it out himself, which proves to be quite difficult, as Krokorok wants nothing to do with Ash. It doesn't even seem to recognize him as a trainer. During the trip, Iris ends up catching an Emolga, and Paul also ends up catching a new Pokemon member as well, a Palpitoad. He decides to send Torterra back to Reggie for now. And then, after stopping another scheme of Team Rocket, Ash manages to catch himself a Roggenrola. Ash makes the choice to send Unfezant to Professor Juniper. Also during this time, Ash and Paul have been doing some intense training. Ash wants to try and trigger this transformation with Infernape again, but to no avail. The two are dead set on unlocking this power again, as they might need it in the future. Paul's new Inbor has proved to be an invaluable training partner for Infernape, and it keeps pushing him farther and farther each day that they train. Inbor is impressed with Infernape's control over its blaze ability, and the fact that the two are both fighting fire types strengthens their ability to train and allows them to trade on levels that they both couldn't before, proving to have massive gains for the two. But even though Paul and Inbor are on the same page, Paul is still slightly struggling with Electivire. It does listen, and the two are still on the same page, but something between the two doesn't feel quite right. But even Paul can sense that they're at a tipping point. One more final push may be what they need to get back in sync. Upon the group's travels to the next city where they have their next gym badge, they come across a small town, Nimbasa Town, hosting a tournament at the Battle Club. Once they learn of this, Paul, Ash, and Iris all decide to enter it, just to battle and have a little bit of fun after all the events that have been going on. There is, however, an old face that has shown up here, Trip. He's really surprised to see Ash and Paul, but after their last battle, Trip has developed a confident streak and looks down on both Paul and Ash. Trip's overconfidence does bug Paul a bit, but he keeps his frustrations to himself for the time being. Iris is also introduced to a brand new rival for herself, Georgia, the Dragon Buster. She criticizes Iris for actually being weak and it being the only dragon type that a Dragon Master has. This angers Iris, and she wants a chance to battle Georgia and prove her wrong. So they all decide to enter the Battle Club tournament, and the rounds are prepared. And it turns out that Trip and Paul are paired in the first round. Trip, thinking that Paul would be as easy as a win as he was last time, sends in his girder. Paul is determined to get back to his level of confidence that he has lost, so he matches Trip's girder with Inbor. The battle between the two is pretty heavy, as Trip's girder has been trained well, but with Paul's training with Inbor and the training that it's done with INFERNAPES since it evolved, they focus more on its endurance, as its size leans more towards a defensive strategy. It becomes apparent that Paul has the more well-rounded Pokemon, as girder is tiring quicker than Inbor. Paul comments that all the emphasis that he put on girder's power makes his weakness that much more obvious. Trip says, "What?" Paul tells him, "Last time, it seemed you managed to close the gap between us, and you managed to beat me, but that may have been a fluke." Paul tells Trip his performance now is a downgrade, and if he wishes to win, then he's going to have to broaden his views and not focus just on one aspect of his Pokemon. Trip argues that he does do that. Paul counters this claim when he tells Trip that he focuses only on power with girder, and its endurance is lacking. Trip then freezes, as Paul says, "Watch," and he orders a heat crash from Imbor. With the power of the move from Imbor's size and its increased speed, these two attributes allow Paul to close out the battle here, getting him to round 2 with Ash and Iris. The next day, the second round of the Battle Club tournament starts, and Ash goes first, and he ends up facing Georgia, and he loses to her Ponyard after choosing Krokorok for the battle, and it just wouldn't listen to him. Next, Iris faces a trainer by the name of Stefan, and after a close battle with her Amoga, Iris is barely able to beat his Sock. Paul ends up beating Georgia in the semifinals with his newly caught Palpitoad, and it ends up being Paul and Iris in the finals. The two trainers didn't think that they would end up battling each other in the finals, but here they are. Iris tells Paul that she doesn't want him to hold anything back. She says she knows that he's been struggling, but "I want your best. I want to battle you the way that Ash battles you." Paul says, "Alright, if you want my best, then you got it," and he sends in Electivire. Iris figured as much, and she sends in her Excadrill because it's been itching for a rematch against Electivire. Iris and Electrodrill seem to be on the same page for once. Over the last few weeks, with her training with Ash and Paul, her and Electivire have managed to get over their differences and have started battling as one. Paul specifically chooses Electivire here because he knows if these two can get past their differences, then Electivire and he can as well. Iris and Paul's battle is very fast-paced and full of power. Although Excadrill has the type advantage, Paul and Electivire have conditioned themselves for battles with ground types, so this battle with Iris is exactly what she wanted. Paul is at his best. Paul and Electivire seem like they are in sync more now than Iris has ever seen before. As the battle rages on, Ash feels something, a heartbeat. Then he looks in his bag, and the stone that N gave him is glowing, and as the battle nears its climax, above, another storm is starting to circulate. Ash sees this, and he realizes what's going on. The stone is reacting to the storm and the battle. As Ash watches on, the battle comes to an end, with Iris barely squeezing out a win over Paul, winning herself the tournament. And just like that, the stone stops glowing, and the storm vanishes as quickly as it came. With the Battle Club behind them, the trio make their way to Nimbasa City and the site of their next gym badge. Ash and Paul are arguing who will get to battle first. In the end, when they get to the gym, Paul enters first, and Elesa, the gym leader, who is holding a fashion show at the time, acknowledges Paul as her next challenger, forcing Ash to sit back and watch with Iris in annoyance. Elesa tells Paul that this will be a 3-on-3 battle, so he better be ready. Paul agrees, and the battle starts. Elesa leads with her Amoga, and Paul, after battling Iris's Amoga, chooses to go with his Cofragrius. The battle starts and Paul is in full control. He knows Amoga has things like Volt Switch to escape battles, so he counters it with Protect, and after establishing a Will-O-Wisp early on, Paul's stall game is successful, and he takes an early win. This was important because it allows Paul to end Elisa's pivoting strategy. Elesa wastes no time in sending in her next Pokemon though, Electric. This thing and its aggressive nature manages to turn the tide of battle and takes Cofragrius down on the crackback. When the Thunder Wave connects, allowing Electric to get in with some crunches on Cofragrius when it was suffering from paralysis. Paul thinks to himself, I have the counter, so he sends in Palpitoad, but he quickly learns that he was mistaken when he learns that Electric's ability is Levitate, nullifying ground types attacks. But Paul is able to establish himself a little bit here after a Sludge Wave hits, causing a poison. In the end, both Palpitoad and Electric fall from fatigue. Elesa then sends in her final Pokemon, Zebstrika. Paul can see that this thing is powerful, so he opts to send in his final Pokemon, Emboar. The Fire Pig proves that it is one of Paul's best Pokemon, as it takes down Zebstrika with minimal effort after tanking a Thunderbolt and slamming it with the Heat Crash, earning Paul the Bolt badge. Elesa thanks Paul for a well-fought battle, and as she gives him the badge, Ash runs over, declaring that he will be the first challenge for Elesa tomorrow, as he wants to earn a badge too. That night is spent with Ash trying to figure out a strategy for the battle. Paul tries to offer some insight. Ash, a little overconfident, responds, "I've already got the perfect strategy for tomorrow." So Paul just shrugs it off and they go to sleep. The next morning, they head back to the gym and Ash makes his challenge. Elesa likes his enthusiasm, so they get right down to business. Elesa sends in her Zeb Striker. Ash, a little overconfident, chooses to go with Kokorok. Paul wonders if Ash has finally lost it. Kokorok still won't listen to him, and he's relying on it, but what can he do? It's Ash's choice, not his. The battle starts, and surprisingly, Kokorok is doing very well, but it becomes apparent quickly to Elesa that Ash and it are not on the same page. And this is where Zeb Striker gets to show what it's really made of, and with a full power stomp, puts down Kokorok, but not before taking damage in the process from a stone edge. Ash recalls it. He was hoping that he could use it to clean sweep the gym, so the two can get over their differences, but that's gonna have to wait. So Ash goes with his next choice, Excelgor. Ash then orders a quick attack, but Elesa counters with a move Ash hadn't seen yet, Flame Charge, and this connects, causing damage to Excelgor. Ash now has to deal with Zeb Striker's increased speed as well, but he is able to stay slightly ahead by having Excelgor use double team. In the end, a Sludge Bomb from Excelgor manages to put Zeb Striker down. Elesa then sends in her Amoga next, and Ash decides to recall Excelgor for Snivy. This battle is a little bit more interactive as Snivy is able to use Tract to his advantage, and after a Vine Whip and a Leaf Blade, Amoga goes down with little damage to Snivy. Elesa chooses to go with her last Pokemon, Galvantula. Ash chooses to leave Snivy in, but this doesn't work out in his favor, as Galvantula is a female, and Snivy's Attract won't work. Eventually, it loses to a Struggle Bug, leaving Ash with only Excelgor. Ash sends back in Excelgor. It is visibly tired from the battle with Zeb Striker. The battle starts and Galvantula manages to hit Excelgor with a Spider Web, reducing its speed. Ash still tries to outspeed Galvantula, but Excelgor is getting very tired. Ash then orders a quick attack and a poison jab from Excelgor. The speed that the quick attack puts into the poison jab is enough to knock out Galvantula with a critical hit, but out of exhaustion, Excelgor falls as well. Ash is disappointed. He really wanted to get a win here and get his 4th badge, but Elesa comes over and presents him with a Bolt badge, telling him that Galvantula technically fell first in battle, so technically he won. Ash, a little hesitant, says, "Are you sure?" And Elesa says, "Yes, take the badge. You and your Pokemon have earned it." So Ash takes the badge and celebrates his victory, but not before Paul reminding him that that victory was kind of hollow, so don't slack on your training. Ash doesn't want to hear it, but he knows Paul's right, so they head back to the Pokemon Center. Later that night, the trio is trying to make a decision. If they head west in Unova, it'll take longer to get to the Village of the Dragons, but all the gyms are in that part of the region. But if they head east, they can cut their time by a third, as the Village of the Dragons is closer to the eastern part of Unova. After some debate, they ultimately decide to head up the western part of Unova, as it'll allow them to accomplish more in the long run. So, the next morning, they head to Driftveil and the site of the next gym. It takes a few weeks, and during that time, Ash and Paul try to bring out the transformation of Infernape, with no success. The white stone won't react. But Ash chooses not to focus on that. He's going to take the approach of when he first got Chimchar, and instead of trying to focus on the main power, just trying to focus on increasing the power of the actual Pokemon, much like he did when he helped Infernape master Blaze. So in doing so, he chooses to focus on his other Pokemon, mainly Krokorok, Durot, and Roggenrola. Ash and Krokorok are still at odds. The two don't get along whatsoever. It acts wild whenever it's out of its Pokeball. One thing that really sets it off is how buddy-buddy Pikachu is with Ash and all the other Pokemon, and it tends to act a little bit more wild when he sees this. Roggenrola is just happy to be part of the team and enjoys training. It really likes battling with Paul's Crustle, as it's a part rock type Pokemon as well, and they can test each other's endurance and defense. Then there's Duat. It's been getting more and more frustrated as of late. With Emboar evolving and all the other Pokemon becoming stronger, it begins to feel like it's being left behind, and as a result, during training, it starts to make mistakes, causing it to injure itself in the process when it's unable to dodge an arm thrust from Emboar. This causes Duat to run off in frustration, forcing the group to look for it and postponing their arrival in Driftveil City by a few days. While all this is going on, Giovanni, Jesse, James, and Meowth have made base on an island off the coast of Driftveil City, and they are in preparations for the first stage of Operation Tempest, and they have their sights set on 3 ancient shrines, said to have sealed the power of the weather inside of them. The trio aim to make up for the mistake they were blamed for, and immediately attack the shrines. After Ash finds Duat and he vows to help it to get stronger by any means necessary, the trio are finally able to move on to Driftveil City, and the chance at the next gym badge. But when Ash and Paul make the challenge to the leader, Clay, they are rejected until someone can fix the supply issue that has occurred with the revival herbs on Milos Island. Once Paul, Ash, and Iris learn that this will be the only way to challenge the gym, they set out on a boat determined to find out what the issue is on Milos Island. But off in the distance, a wicked storm is brewing, and Paul again hears another voice calling out to him in his head. And that's all we have for part 8. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. So what do you guys think about all the developments? How do you feel about the battle with Infernape and VOLCORONA? And what about Paul and Embor's evolution? And the fact that Paul and Electivire are almost on the same page? And how do you feel about the frustration that Duat is facing and the fact that Krokorok will not listen to Ash? Let me know in the comments down below. And also, if you guys enjoyed the video, please don't forget to subscribe and drop a like, as it really helps with the YouTube algorithm and helps the channel get to a bigger audience. And if you haven't already, please make sure to check out the Discord, especially if you want to get advice on your own what ifs and have people help you out or offer suggestions. That community is really starting to grow, and I'm really proud of what we're doing over there. And also, if you haven't already, please follow me on Twitter, as I post things there that I'm doing in real time, so you can get a behind the scenes look of what I'm doing at that current moment. And lastly, if you guys like the content that I'm bringing to you and you want to help me further, please consider subscribing to my Patreon, as every little bit really helps. But anyway, I'm Ronin CHARIZARD, and I will see you in the next video.